Good evening to our viewers and listeners across Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique. Thank you so much for joining us this evening as we begin to dissect and discuss the 2025 budget. My name is Russell John, and I have the honor this evening of sitting amongst some of Grenada's most distinguished, most insightful, most experienced minds as we analyze the 2025 budget. And so I'd love to introduce our panel this evening. To my immediate left, Mrs. Jennifer Robertson. She's a chartered banker and a risk manager with over 30 years of experience in the field. So I know you're going to have a lot to say about today's budget. To her left, Mr. Richard Duncan OBE, economist, accountant, retired banker. He's worn many hats over his years of service in Grenada, and definitely we'll be looking forward to hearing your insights, sir. And to his left, Mr. Christopher Diali, a businessman, a former senator, a private sector representative, and again, one of the most distinguished minds in Grenada. So we're definitely looking forward to some of your insights, sir. Good evening.
Good evening.
Joining us later this evening via our online platform will be economist Dr. Cullen Gilchrist as well. So, ladies, gentlemen, welcome again. And to begin this afternoon's discussion, I'd like a one-word summary. When you reflect on the 2025 budget, having listened, what is the one word that comes to mind? I'll start with the lady in the midst.
I would say comprehensive.
Comprehensive. We'll dig into why that is in just a sec. Mr. Duncan, how about you?
I would say uplifting.
Uplifting. Comprehensive, uplifting. Mr. Diali?
On theme.
On theme. Comprehensive, uplifting, on theme. I suppose somewhere at home, the Ministry of Finance is definitely clapping their hands to hear that that's how the budget was received. Ms. Robertson, what would you say are the top two things that you're most excited about?
I would say I'm most excited about the focus on the health sector, because that has been something that has been delayed for quite a while.
Right.
And then addressing the issue of skills and talent management as critical for the way forward.
So when you say comprehensive, do you feel like those two things that you're most excited about, do you feel like these were addressed in that comprehensive way that you mentioned, or is something there that perhaps is lacking?
No, I didn't pick up anything that was lacking. As my colleague Diali said, it's on theme in terms of all of the things that we need to address, and comprehensive in terms of the other areas that I guess we will speak to later on as the evening progresses.
Excellent. Mr. Duncan, how about you? Top two things that you're most excited about having listened to the budget.
Right. The emphasis on education and skills training is particularly significant. And I like the fact that the financing of the deficit will be involving new borrowings, treasury bill borrowings on the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange. That's quite interesting, and I love it.
I suspect you may have some more to say on that. Mr. Diali, deficit budget, how do you feel about that?
It raises some level of concern is probably a strong word, but it raises some level of discussion, because we have not had good experiences with deficit budgets in the past. So it does raise that, but I think the minister did a good job today in highlighting the sectors that they want to see push for 2025.
Right.
And that, in my view, is something that is important, and how we develop it is open for discussion.
Excellent. So what would be the two things that you're most excited about?
Well, I am not excited. I'll go answer the other way. I'm not excited that the private sector wasn't given some major concern in this budget in terms of fiscal reform or anything like that. On the other side, though, I think the sectors that they have cited, as I said before, and I like Richard, I'm concerned about skills training and what happens there. I think we have a deficit in this country in terms of productivity and labor shortages, as mentioned in the medium-term strategy paper.
Yeah.
For most of the sectors in construction, agriculture, education services, less so. But those two major sectors are expected to push the economy in the medium term. I think we need to see how we do that, and understanding what happened in the World Bank report about our education in the region is damning. And as Prime Minister indicated, we have serious work to do there.
And on that note, I just want to bring in both Mrs. Robertson and Mr. Duncan here. Again, comprehensive uplifting. Mr. Duncan, you mentioned education and skills training being one of the thematic focuses. Do you feel like this deficit budget, which may raise a bit of concern, does it adequately address the need for education, particularly as construction is shaping up to be one of the major areas that the budget will be affecting in 2025?
The answer is yes, and I did say education and skills training.
Yeah.
And I like to make the point that post-primary education involves skills training.
Yeah.
I tend to believe post-primary means tertiary, secondary, and so forth, right? And I want to make the point too that St. Lucia is already out of the gate. If we monitor the news yesterday, I think CDB is loaning them I think up to $30 million to revamp, to overhaul the education and skills training system. So they are out of the gate already. And we probably need to take a page from the book and take it very early, because they have done quite well. When I was in school back in 1984, 87, Senator Diali as well, we had about 12 Grenadian students on Keyville. St. Lucia had 100 and about 20 students. And I'm saying that if we're going to be competitive in the sub-region or globally, education and skills training need to be emphasized. And I believe we are heading in the right direction. The other part that I like about the emphasis on education is in the area of information technology, where there is this center of excellence where Grenadians are going to be trained, especially in cybersecurity. This is extremely important. So I think what we are doing, we are building out a cadre of skilled workers for the jobs of tomorrow. And some of those jobs are already here, right? So based on how the world is evolving with information, communication, technology, that is where the jobs are. So if we don't train them today, we'll be lamenting the same way we are lamenting now about construction and skills. We didn't prepare 10, 15, 20 years ago. Today we are crying. Right. I'm saying that looking to the future, we are laying that basis and laying that foundation. On the question of the deficit budget, a deficit budget is a non-issue once you know how it is you are going to finance the deficit. And if you look at the budget on the current account, there's a surplus.
Yeah.
So you are not consuming more than you are earning. It is when you look to the capital programs, which is laying the basis for the transformation and future performance of the economy, that you have to borrow and invest in those things. Right. Whether it be the same skills training, whether it be the hospital, whether it be roads, bridges, your infrastructure, which is crumbling. Those are investments that you necessarily have to get involved in. And when we look at how the deficit is going to be financed, an interesting part of it is the drawdown of government deposits. Government has money sitting in the banking system doing nothing.
That's true.
So if they can take some of that and put in capital projects to generate jobs and create a more productive and prosperous Grenada, then why not? So that's my take on the deficit budget, or the first take. I have a second take, but I would pause for now.
We'll pause and get into that. Yes. Mrs. Robertson, what about you? Does the idea of a deficit budget at all concern you? Maybe not concern, but give you pause, something to note and be worried about?
No, I'm not concerned. I mean, when I looked at the budget and what was proposed, I think Mr. Duncan captured it appropriately. If you know how your budget is funded, how the deficit will be funded, I think that is what is most important. For me as well, what I saw present, and which we have to ensure that we underscore as we move forward, is the need for continued, strong, effective fiscal responsibility. Because that is where any concern, real or perceived, will get to be tested.
Right.
The strength of the governance and the systems that we have in place to ensure that that budget is implemented on theme as planned and as we have proposed that it will be funded. So I am not concerned. I think for me the key thing is going forward, making sure that the risk management frameworks exist, the governance work that has already begun, that we have seen, that continues, because that is what will determine the outcomes of the proposed budget.
Mr. Diali, in light of what our colleagues have shared, how would you respond?
Well, the thing with a deficit budget, and I hear Richard on the financing of it through the drawdown on deposits and going there in the Eastern Caribbean securities market to issue treasury bills.
Yeah.
That is good in that we know where we project to get the 380 odd million in deficit. The concern, of course, is that, as Ms. Robinson indicated, if things give us a little test, if we have weather conditions and so on, and the capital side, the recurrent side, doesn't give us what we expect, then what you find happening with a deficit budget is that there is the possibility that all the capital works that you have indicated you want to do, and this budget is heavy in capital works for 2025, all the schools and other areas that we plan to develop. So those capital projects get delayed and in some cases never happen. And that is the risk that it poses. Whereas outside of a deficit budget, you're generating enough revenue to pump, because government needs to use some of the surplus on the recurrent side to invest on the capital side. And that is the general macroeconomics. So that is a risk, and we just need to ensure, because in Grenada we have an issue with implementation.
That is true.
You cannot deny that. And once you have issues with implementation, then the efficiency issue and the capacity issue to execute on the capital side comes into play. And that is something that, with all of the capital works that we're planning for 2025, we need to understand if there is a capacity, both from a human resource side and equipment side, to effect, and how, if we don't have it, it's going to affect what happens.
Excellent. Well said. And as we speak of those the capital expenditures, when we look at the increases in capital expenditure for the various sections, they are, as you said, on theme. Which of these do you suspect may be at most risk of not being implemented should external shocks come into play?
I think the road infrastructure is the one that will be at risk. The schools, I don't see it as major, because we're building a few, but we're renovating some and improving in terms of what they do at the schools and skills training, and give them different access to different labs. But infrastructure in terms of the roads is heavy in terms of capacity and what you need, and to finish them, and the different things that they want to do. So that, to me, are the ones that may get affected in terms of slowdown and so on. And then whether we have the kind of skills in Grenada to do it. I mean, when we think about, I have always proposed we need 20,000 more people in Grenada. We just not up to Richard knows me very well on this point. And we need to do it. It is not about, we have a problem with attitude to work, and what happens particularly in the construction industry, and we just need to do this in a systematic way to get more people to come into our country to effect the work. And I just think we have no option. Our Prime Minister indicated in a meeting we had earlier this last week that, left up to me, get rid of the work permit issue, and I support that fully. Because we're talking in CARICOM about movement of people, but we have never really gotten it to happen. I think this is the right opportunity. It needs to happen now.
Mrs. Robertson, how do you respond to that?
No, on point. I also share similar sentiments. And when we spoke earlier about the skills gap, I am not just thinking of the skills gap in terms of the education system and our youth, but as Mr. Diali correctly said, we have a serious skills gap when it comes to the workforce. And so he is on point in terms of the need to ensure we build the capacity to be able to execute, because the cost of not having the appropriate skill sets on these sorts of projects. And also when you think about the continued trend where we always have to be importing talent, and that's why I mentioned earlier the whole issue is not just skills, but how do you manage talent going forward if you really and truly are looking towards building a sustainable tomorrow. So I think we do need to address definitely the capacity issue. As I mentioned earlier, the risk management capabilities, project risk management, whether it's public, private sector, I don't think it's always one of our strongest areas. And so building capacity in terms of project risk management, that is key. That is key.
Mr. Duncan, I want to bring you in here on the idea of the capital expenditure that has been outlined in the budget. Would you say that in terms of the expenditures that has been budgeted, it follows and aligns well with the speech itself? So oftentimes, we say we are focusing on this area, focusing on that area, but sometimes the actions don't match the words. Would you say in this case that the budget, in terms of allocations for capital expenditure, matches the theme and the ideas that the government has been pushing?
Yeah, almost perfect alignment, but not only in the budget, but also with the Vision 75 and the National Sustainable Development Plan 2035. I think it's important that we realize now we are not in an era where we are budgeting year by year, but the budget is within a medium to long-term framework, right? So that you could see that theme hitting right through as we go along. So I think it's kudos to the government that has occurred. And to come back to Chris's point about the possibility of shortfalls that might impact implementation, I want to take time out to again make the point that there's a current account surplus. You have more revenue being collected than you are spending for consumption purposes, right? But Inland Revenue Department has done a great job, in my view, since the amnesty to ensure that there's enhanced tax administration, tax compliance, and the closing of certain loopholes. So I think it's kudos to IRD that we are seeing increase in revenue intake without any changes in the tax rate or any changes in taxes per se. Right? That I think is quite commendable, and we should take time out. Now, on the side of funding the deficit through new borrowings from, not the banking system now, so sorry, Mrs. Robertson, but from the Regional Government Securities Exchange, it is an opportunity for Grenadians who have monies in banks earning 0.75% on fixed deposit. Zero. Well, not even zero, minus. After the fees and so on come out. Right. It's an opportunity to diversify, as we like to say, fancy with your portfolio. Buy some treasury bills. But first, check in with your bank that has a wealth management department or broker-dealer arrangement. Open a brokerage account. It costs you nothing. Right? And some of the money you have sitting idle, right? Whether it's 10,000, 5,000, whatever, buy some treasury bills so you're actually taking part in the economic process and at the same time earning, a return on your money. In the banking system, half the money, half the deposits are sitting idle. 51% is your loan to deposit ratio. Unprecedented, at least in my lifetime. What the central bank wants is for about 75, Robbie, I think the 80% of deposits to be loaned out. Loan to deposit ratio, they call it. Right now it's 51. So with that excess liquidity in the system, and government choosing to float new treasury bills, that is your chance to take some of those idle funds as householders to invest in the securities exchange. And that's why I'm giving, positive compliment for the way in which the government intends the mix of measures to fund the deficit.
Excellent. And on the idea of that opportunity, so there's an opportunity for households, for individuals who have a bit of additional funds in the bank to consider investing that money and earning some returns on their investment. Mr. Dialli, you're a businessman. You've been in business for quite some time. What other opportunities for households, individuals, the layman, what opportunities are you seeing within the plans that have been outlaid in the budget?
Well, Richard is correct in that Treasury bills offers you, because one of the things that we have in the region and in our country is limited instruments that we could invest in.
Yeah.
So the ordinary man right now could only partake if a company issues shares, buy some shares here, or a CD, go into a CD, which, as Richard say, negative returns. So the money sits idle in the banks, in the bank and the non-banking sector. So we need to find ways. ECCB have floated the idea of mutual funds and what can happen there. So it gives our average citizen within the OECS region an opportunity to move monies into those kind of investments, of course understanding the risk. As Richard say, if you have a discussion with your investor or somebody who is in that business, they will tell you diversify your portfolio into long-term, short-term and long-term.
Right.
So that is something that you have to consider. And not just individuals, there are institutions like pension funds that need to get that access to that kind of investment. So it is good that government is we support that wholeheartedly from a private sector point of view, because it gives us opportunities to look differently in how we invest and what we do, and to keep the risk at a manageable level. So that's a good move by the government, and you have to support that all the way, so that and the drawdown from the deposits. But as I have my chairman here from CBI, I must throw in his pot from 500 million or 400 million to 140 million. And we used to use that for budgetary support. We used to use that for capital works as well. That also raises a concern, so I just throw that on the radar to see how my chairman will respond.
Well received, it landed nicely, you know what I mean? So I'll take it from the pot and put it on the plate so we can dissect and, consume. So no, so the reality is correct, and that's a good thing about, to Robbie's point, risk management. So you are facing a particular future. If there's going to be a contraction in one particular source of income, you need to recalibrate, and that is what is being done. So at the CBI, one of the things that we have targeted in terms of ownership in the program and promoting the program is to make sure that our application flows return to at least the pre-Russia-Ukraine level. That we see as a kind of normalized situation. And as a past chair, Senator Dialli understands what it takes to bring that about, and we have been working extremely hard. Commendation to the CEO and his team in 2024 to make sure that 2025 looks pretty much like 2021, 22. But apart from that, I want to segue also on the CBI question. And Senator Dialli made the point that not much was said about private sector involvement. But what was said, to my mind, was extremely significant with respect to CBI, where the minister made the point that regulations will be passed to allow local Grenadian developers to bring forth their project to the CBI table at reduced fees, because the fees could be prohibitive. They were set for a particular clientele of developers. So those fees will be reduced by 70%. So if you had to pay $1 today, you're paying 30 cents tomorrow for our local developers. And apart from that, we are going to be putting in place a sort of a mentorship program whereby those successful international developers who have been here could mentor and tutor some of our local developers who have projects that they want to bring to fruition. That, to my mind, is a potential game changer for the Grenadian private sector.
Okay, so let's just dig into that just a little bit. Who are we talking about here? If I consider myself entrepreneurial. Does this apply to someone like me?
It applies to anyone who deems themselves to be a developer and meets certain criteria.
Okay.
So if you have a project to develop investors who are interested in becoming to fund, your project. Coming to fund, your project.
Because oftentimes when the word developer is thrown around, the immediate thing that comes to mind is hotel, resort, tourism, some type of concrete structure. But based on what you're saying here, there is, Mr. Diali said, a football team. All right. So there really isn't a limit per se in what can be done. So it is perhaps limited only by the imagination of the entrepreneurs that we have.
By his or her imagination and fiscal priority, which is in legislation.
Yeah.
So you need to get the 2016 legislation, I think it is, where the government back then indicated what the priority sectors are. And some of the sectors are so broad that almost anything could fit in. And that's the bad thing about us. When you say, what are your priorities? You list everything. Everything can be priority, but it is there in the act, so people are broadly covered.
And so,
Mr. Robertson, just to add
yes, go ahead.
To Richard's point, the thing about CBI is that it gives you so much flexibility. Mr. Robinson might not like to hear us say that because of financing and where it can come at a cheaper cost. But, in the credit union, we talk about a bond. In CBI, we need to expand the bond.
Right.
And that's why I say football, whatever it is. Because you need money for certain sectors in your economy to flourish and do well. Sports is a big thing.
Yeah.
And what happens in sports and sports tourism. You can imagine our national football team have a CBI initiative funding the players and developing the players to professional level so that we could make a World Cup.
Yeah.
We may not win, but at least we could make a World Cup just as how Jamaica did it.
Yeah.
So these are the areas that CBI need to expand into. As Richard said, there are terms and conditions, but once you reduce the fees and they do the things that we're suggesting, I think it opens up great opportunity for us through that program.
Excellent and well said. That alone has gotten me excited. But with all the excitement, Mrs. Robertson, risk management definitely comes into play. So within the education side of this, would you call for more education within project development, monitoring and evaluation? Are these some of the areas you'd be looking for skills training in, or are there other priority areas that you think are more important?
Well, no, I did mention that earlier, that the whole capacity building in terms of project management and general risk management, that is important because, again, looking at the budget, and I described it as comprehensive, I think it is really introducing a reset of how we look at running the government's business.
Right.
And I'm always passionate about making that distinction because I think generally as a population, we don't grasp that government is a business. That's how I see it. We are running the state's affairs, and just as you run a private entity, you are running a business. And so all of the things that you would employ typically in a bank, in a private company, you have to ensure that you have the same infrastructure in place in running the state's affairs. So in terms of the budget as proposed, we know there's a lot of capital projects. We look at the education projects, etc. Doing that necessary skills gap in terms of the workforce that has to execute the budget in the various ministries, and also ensuring that you have that capacity development in the public sector. To me, that is key because that is one of the points I underscored looking at the budget proposal, that generally, even as a state, a government, we have to look at our enterprise risk management framework. It is not something just for a private organization. I think going forward, having rigorous risk management units within the government itself, that to me is also necessary as we move forward for successful implementation, because risk management and implementation, they go hand in hand. And most times you don't meet your objectives is because maybe you did not plan forward sufficiently in terms of anticipating the risks, putting the necessary safeguards in place. So I think think that is key going forward, and that comes back to my earlier point about the need for continued governance,
Right.
and making sure that what has started we continue in terms of building out a really, really robust governance framework, and establishing proper risk management systems.
Well.
Well, good evening, players, and welcome. It's time for the NLA's Daily Pick 3 with Multi-X evening draw for today, Friday, the 7th of March, 2025. I'm Lexan Fletcher, and I'll be your draw hostess for this evening. Joining me this evening is Ms. Keneve Edwards. She is representing Arizona Company Limited accountants and advisors. Ms. Edwards is here to ensure the games are conducted in a fair and accountable manner, that the game balls have not been tampered with and are within industry standards. And with the Pick 3 game, don't forget you can bet as little as $1 on inline, mix, and pair tickets, and from $2 on backup tickets. Let's find out what the winning numbers will be for this evening. It's pays to play. Good luck. All right, check your tickets. First up is 1. The second 0, and the final 4. Time to recap, double check your tickets. First up was 1, the second 0, final 4. If you're a winner, congratulations to you. Let's move on to Multi-X. If you placed your bets, good luck. And the winning Multi-X ball is free play. That's free play. To our winners, congratulations again. We also had 82 winners from the afternoon draw with a total payout of $19,090. Congrats again. Do stay tuned. Up next, Playway with Multi-X. We'll see you soon. And welcome back. It's the evening draw for Playway with Multi-X for today, Friday, the 7th of March, 2025. Ms. Keneve Edwards is joining me once again. She is representing Arizona Company Limited accountants and advisors. Now, here's a reminder with the Playway game, all you got to do is bet as little as $1 up to $10 or in increments on any number or dream symbol of your choice and get to win 24 times the amount you bet. That's $24 for every dollar spent. Hope you got your tickets for this evening. Let's find out firstly what the winning Playway number will be. Value your dreams, win your way with Playway. Good luck. And the winning Playway number is 31. A 3131 dream symbol is cockroach. If you're a winner, congratulations to you. Let's move on to Multi-X. Good luck. And the winning Multi-X ball is 5X. That's 5X. For those of you who placed your bets this evening on Multi-X, big congratulations to you all. We also had 213 winners from the afternoon draw with a total payout of $9,192. Congrats again. Do stay tuned. Up next, cash for a draw with Multi-X. See you then. And welcome back. It's time for the evening draw for the daily cash for game with Multi-X for today, Friday, the 7th of March, 2025. I've got Ms. Keneve Edwards with me once again. She's here representing Arizona Company Limited accountants and advisors. Don't forget, when playing the cash for game, you can bet as little as $1 on most of the bet types with the exception of backup, in which case you bet $2. So hope you got your tickets. It's time for me to select tonight's winning numbers. It's more plays, bigger prizes. Good luck. And the first ball up. First up, 0. Second, 9. The third is 8. And the final is 5. Just to recap, first up was 0, the second 9, third 8, final 5. Of course, if you're a winner, congratulations to you, and let's find out what the winning Multi-X ball will be. Good luck. And the winning Multi-X ball is 3X. That's 3 eggs. If you're a big winner this evening for this round, congratulations to you. And we also had 10 winners from the afternoon draw with a total payout of $2,150. Congrats again. Hope you got your tickets for the lotto draw. The estimated jackpot, $270,000. We'll see you then.
And I'd certainly like to dig into that just a bit, but we are due for our very first break, so we'll be back shortly and take a look at some of the macroeconomic outlooks concerning our budget in just a few moments.
Grenada, it's time to feel the adrenaline and crown national champions. The Horizon National Championship 2025 is expected to be bigger, faster, and more thrilling than ever. Mark your calendars for March 15th and 16th at the Karani James Athletic Stadium. The nation's best athletes will battle for glory in electrifying races, soaring jumps, and powerful throws. Admission, finish line $30, main stand $20, bleachers $10. Speed, strength, and heart-stopping finishes. It's all happening from 11 a.m. daily. Be there to witness future Grenadian stars. Get your tickets now at Grenadian Optical, Melville Street, St. George, and Spiceland Mall, Grand Anse, and GoToFed.com.
Good evening and welcome back to our 2025 post-budget discussion. So we continue, ladies and gentlemen. I want to look at a little bit at the macroeconomic outlook for Grenada with respect to our budget. One of the things that stood out, fiscal responsibility, and the fact that in 2025 there will be an extension of that, let's call it a break, that we've given to the government with regards to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Mr. Diali, I want to start with you on this one. Does that extension give you any pause at all, or do you think it's necessary?
No, the suspension, in my view, is proper. Because the act allows for a situation where there is a serious economic downturn in whatever caused by whatever disaster, that you can use it. And you know, in the past, when we had Ivan and so on, we struggled without that kind of provision to get access to funding, and as well as to reschedule debt and debt payments and all of that. So it was a real struggle, and this new act, Resilience Act as well, has put in place that you could suspend it, so it gives government freedom to use funds that would have otherwise have to be used elsewhere to put into the building back and recovery. So I think it's something that is there to be used, and it must be used, especially when we have a situation that warrants it. So I don't have no concern about that. We just that government, as Ms. Robinson indicated earlier, need to be responsible in their governance and what they do, so that it's not suspended indefinitely. It has to come back on board, because the IMF and these organizations watches that carefully, and the grading and the rating they give you is to understand how you are moving the economy in a place where you can come back to that, because it gives you targets to GDP, for example, salaries and wages that you have to meet and so on. And these are things that we must manage as we go forward.
Okay. To any of our other panelists, same response, or is there anything that we can add to that?
No, I concur with former Senator Diali's sentiment on the matter of the justification of the suspension. My hope is that in 2026 there will be a nice reassessment. Hopefully everything goes according to plan, and you bring it back in 27.
Okay, and Mrs. Robertson, do you think, given the fact that the suspension is going to be extended, that has its implications, as we outlined, it is there to use, it's being used, but given the revenue and the expenditure targets that we have set for the 2025 budget, do you think that we can achieve all of that without risking or compromising further the fiscal responsibility that we have agreed to?
Well, I cannot respond to say we will achieve all of it.
All right.
I think it comes back to the intention and how intentional we are to ensure we achieve it. Because as Mr. Duncan just said, or Mr. Diali rather, at the end of the day, we will be monitored in terms of what are those measures we are taking to ensure we're able to revert. And I think that is what is key in ensuring that we stick to the game plan,
right.
Understand the implications if we don't revert, because we are in a good place. I mean, when I looked at some of the key indicators today, and even in the budget presentation, I think Grenada is in a very good place. However, again, it may sound repetitive, the determining factor is that risk management and the governance. But we are generally, in my humble opinion, not in a bad place.
Excellent. Mr. Duncan, achievable. And since Mrs. Robertson shied away from giving a yes or no to that, let me put you on a scale. How achievable do you think it is?
No, it's 100% achievable. I think the reality is that, and that's why we have to give the Ministry of Finance and the Government of Grenada credit, not just this government, but prior administration. The public, you have a number of, Robbie would call them guardrails that have been established. You have the Public Finance Management Act that has to be enforced. You have the Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. Well, you have the Integrity Commission, right, that they're supposed to be oversighting and looking. These are things they did not have. Let's say in 2004 or 2000, whenever. They are new, right, coming through the period of structural adjustment, right, where we spoke about shared sacrifices.
Yeah.
So my point is simply this. If you look at the financial history of Grenada, we have been through several phases where we didn't do too well, structural adjustment, sacrifices, the gains squandered, you come back again, more problems. This last time, I think with the help of the World Bank and IMF, those guardrails are there to make sure that the gains of the last structural adjustment program are not squandered.
Yeah.
Hence, so and then the Fiscal Resilience Oversight Committee is another body that is there to make sure you keep the government on point. Because when government fail in their obligations, which are to protect and promote the well-being of its citizens, the citizens pay the price.
Yeah.
Now, shared sacrifices, fine. Nobody sit down and say, how will those gains be shared? Nobody. So when things are good, people start scrambling and fighting because there was never a framework for sharing the gains. However, we're at a place now whereby I believe the budget, as programmed, 3-year medium-term plan and all this kind of good stuff, put us in a very good place. So, one of the biggest risks I think most people are often worried about and can relate to best, I think, is their debt to GDP ratio. People are always concerned about that because that could show you off, right? And as we like to say in economics, continuous deficits leads to debt because you have to borrow if you're not right. So, based on the programming, two things are clear. One, the debt trajectory, according to the IMF, page 11 of one of the documents, the debt is sustainable. The target, I think, is 60% by 2035. Based on the program and how much we intend to borrow, how much we intend to pay back, or have to pay back based on obligations, that target can be reached by 2030, which is 5 years ahead of schedule. So even if you miss it, you're still on track. Yeah. And as we are speaking right now, that is a message I think we need to get across. You have done well. Do not squander those gains. Prudence, proper risk management, proper programming of your fiscal resources and so forth are necessary.
I hope that message gets across. Mr. Diali, I want to bring you in here. Again, achievable, how achievable are our targets under these circumstances?
No, Richard is absolutely right on this debt situation. I am one of believe that countries have to attract debt because our revenue income streams are limited as to what you could do and where you can do. If it's not cross-border taxes, it's through internal taxes. And CBI now offers us a different revenue stream. However, as he said, the gains must not be squandered. Hence, we have these acts that were put in place to keep a check on our politicians, primarily on how they spend, and they must account. So that is absolutely clear. Debt never worried me from the standpoint that once you get into debt and you can manage and pay your debt, debtors are not really concerned. Once you're meeting your targets and paying. But that requires prudential management and of your finances and what you do. So you can't default and expect that reputation wouldn't hit you when you go back to look to borrow. So you have to manage that and understand what that is. And we have to borrow, That's what it is. We can't, as Richard say, you promise to upgrade the citizenry in our country through social programs and other programs that we must have to protect our people. And we say now that because of the debt we can't implement. And that in itself flies, and all the programs that you have will not be met. So we have, unfortunately, and I will say that, our politics in the past have demanded that they put controls on us. If you want to say have a stick over us to beat us, to streamline, probably, but unfortunately that's where it is. And I think it has worked well since we implemented it. We have kept, either this party or this government or the one before, have kept very much to the guidelines that we have set. And we did some adjustments in the last Resilience Act. Nothing wrong with that, because things changes, you have to change with it as well. So you need to understand it. So I think we're on point with the debt. When I read the debt documents, I don't think there's any major concern here. And the mix in how they're going about to close the deficit and what debt they intend to engage in, I think is also well accepted as being good security. Going on a regional securities market to do a treasury bill is a perfect place. We have a lot of guidelines and protection there. So, you know.
And, again, opens up that opportunity for Grenadians to get wealthy as we achieve the goals that we're going after. But you did mention the risk of external shocks. Every year we have a hurricane season. We have seen countries becoming more insular. North America has been moving towards these protectionist policies. How do you think these things are going to affect us over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, especially in light of the things we're hoping to achieve with this budget?
Well, the risk of natural disasters through some system is always present. It is how we respond in terms of recovery and how we build to minimize the damage and the risk that poses. I think Grenada, after Ivan, have made significant changes in the building code and what we do. How we deal with energy, PV systems, and encouraging that, and how we use solar to help is another major issue. We are a net importing country, whether it's in food or energy. And the risks now for inflation, based on how the United States is positioning themselves with all of these tariff talks, is going to affect us in some manner. I think the minister today addressed that to some degree, and we have to look, in my view, South-South trading. We have developed, the Prime Minister have been very particular to develop relationships with Africa and see how we could start relationships there and move away from the traditional ones and see where we can get our people to have access, whether it's food or not, and other commodities, so that it could help with a projected issue if Mr. Trump goes through with his tariff discussions. So I think that is the opportunity for us. We always do it north-south. Here is an opportunity for us to go south-south. We have Guyana, we have Central and South America, and these are countries that are big in production and what they do. Why not? The language barrier, in my view, is a minor thing to deal with. So there is opportunity for us as small island developing states, and that is somewhere the inflation is something we have to keep our eye on, because it will affect food in particular, and how we deal with food security, and probably when we look at agriculture, whether or not what the minister suggested today is going to help with that, because that is an area that we really have to look closely at as we see how this thing in the US pans out and what happens as a traditional trading partner. Of course, now we've seen an opportunity with Canada. because of what's going on in them
With
and
America,
Canada.
yeah.
You know, we probably could take some of the fruits and vegetables from Canada and see how we could develop a bilateral with them, you know, that could assist our people. So there is opportunity, and I think we need to identify it and work on it.
Okay. We can't speak risk and not bring in the risk manager in the room. So, Mrs. Robertson, what are the key risks that you're seeing for Grenada's economy? And do you think that the budget that, as presented, adequately addresses those risks?
Yeah. Well, I think the whole issue of the external environment right now, while all indicators are positive in terms of growth prospects through to the end of 25 into 26, I don't think we can ignore the fact that we need to closely monitor what transpires in terms of all that we see evolving in terms of change in policy positions by some of our major trading partners. Truth be told, we are always impacted one way or the other based on the sort of interdependencies that we have as a country, as a region. And that is where the whole issue of really pushing the boundaries, as Mr. Diali just said, in that we have to look elsewhere. Or we have to ensure that we are exploiting all opportunities that may be available. And that is one of the things that really, you know, sparked my interest with the budget again, and even the debt management strategy in terms of how the budget will be achieved, how we will push forward in terms of ensuring that we're able to withstand the external shocks. And I think with more diversification as proposed in the plans, and looking at how we diversify even the debt stock of how to finance the budget, I think we are positioning ourselves very well. The one thing I want to touch on in terms of the key risks as well, and how we really seek to insulate outside of exploring new trading partners, new opportunities cross-border, is the whole issue of the public-private partnerships. Earlier we spoke about the debt to GDP ratio, and I think it remains an area that is really, really underexploited in terms of what it can do for assisting with managing of your debt to GDP ratio. The same private sector involvement that we spoke about earlier, how can we have a more involved private sector and the banking system as well in support of the government initiatives, such that we don't always think you have to depend on an external sovereign to assist you in terms of pushing forward your agendas. So I think the public-private partnerships is one of the avenues that we could really build upon, and it can do a world of good for us, because one of the key things it does, it helps to manage your debt to GDP ratio in terms of how it is calculated. And I think it's something that we should really, really push forward on. The other key risk outside of the external forces that we really have to monitor is, again, how do you really build a productive economy? Because the truth is we continue to remain highly vulnerable to climate risks, as was alluded to. Another major hurricane, and we know what that can do. So really pushing through in terms of how we revamp the agriculture sector, looking at what is productivity in a Grenadian context, so we could really insulate against the typical external shocks. I think that remains also key in terms of managing that other key risk, in terms of ensuring that we diversify our income streams, and such that we could build the resiliency that we need in the event of those continued external shocks.
Mr. Diali, I know you have a response to that.
Yeah, no, Ms. Robertson is so correct. And I want to cite an example. We just built a new fisheries plant, or what we want to call it, in Soubise, right, where we put in more ice making and so on and so forth. And what we have never exploited, and I want to come to a positive on this as well, we have never gotten, we have jetties and ice makers all around the country in St. Andrews, and we never hear about a fish processing plant. Another issue of mine that I've always said we should do, we ship out our first class tunas, and the second class we hold for local consumption. Why we not open a fish processing canning plant behind one of those facilities that we put up? I see the Prime Minister mention the fact that we have a blue economy ministry that is going to be set up. Excellent. Because we have more water around us than land.
True.
So we need to strategically exploit what we can there, whether it's through fishing, whether it's through sea moss planting, whether it's clams. There is so much opportunity there. And for young people to get involved as well. And the science and technology, bring it to marry so that we understand how these fisheries can develop sea egg production, what happens with it, and start doing studies so that we can get a more structured approach to exploiting what we have there. So those are areas that I think, and when Mr. Robinson mentioned about productive sectors, the issue of construction as a lead sector for us in 25 to 26, based on the medium-term plan, construction is never a productive sector. It's short-term to keep employment at a good level, keep the economy and monies in the economy functioning, and so on. But you have to identify a sector that could give you a productive, like agriculture or fisheries, and how we could develop our people to get into that so that it continues for us and produces, and we could develop it more further. So that is important, and we will always have climate risk to all the sectors that we adjust. It is becoming more important, and I recently said on another program, and I probably was criticized for it, I think the carronage and what is happening on the carronage is something that we need to address. It wasn't addressed in this budget. I don't know if it will be looked at, but the carronage is in severe problems in terms of that seawall and the porosity of the seawall and what is happening. The roads and the mooring of the vessels on the wall that wasn't designed for that load. And these are things that we need to address. There has been a project about the carronage spoken about years now. Well, a walkway coming around, wrapping around the tunnel and so on. But we need to now prioritize that on the climate resilience and what monies are available there. We have grant monies that we are available that the government could look at. But these, to me, are not projects that could wait 5 years. We need to attack it now. We can't do everything now, obviously, but we need to put it on the radar so that it could happen in the next. This medium-term plan speaks about 3 years hence. It must be part of that 3 years from now.
Okay, and you are right. We can't hit everything at the same time. Agriculture and food security, both mentioned by yourself and Mrs. Robertson, is one of the key priority areas. We heard of the new MNIB, IMEXA, the Import-Export Agri-Mart. Initial thoughts on that? Mr. Duncan, I'll start with you.
Yes, well, even before I go into that, we talk a lot about production, about agriculture, and we still have a we still kind of romanticize over these things. These things are sciences. They require, serious and high risk. I mean, I feel it for farmers. When the rains fall for longer, and more heavily, so it's really thing. But so we have problems to solve in that sector. I even look at the horticulture or cut flower industry. Grenada has been winning gold at Chelsea for 20 years or more. And today Grenada cannot export a 20-foot container of cut flowers. I mean, what really is that? How do you use these things to drive exports, have sufficient volumes, so you really turn it into a serious and strong business and so on? So I'm in agreement. In terms of where I put it, is there a role? Let me just answer this question. Is there a role for CBI to play, for example, in bringing in investors who can partner with a local developer to drive an agricultural project? I'm saying these are the kind of things we want to look at. Let the local developers say what it is they have, and then we take that to market, in the CBI space. But there's a second aspect it. So that Farmer Senegal knows that. We have about 10,000 high net worth individuals as citizens of Grenada through CBI. We have to find the time, the space, and the method to woo, in my humble view, these people to further invest in Grenada. I mean, you'll be amazed as to the industries and the sectors and what have you not that these people are into. How do we get them? to do a second round type investment in Grenada. And if you could only get 1% of them, that's 1,000.
Still got 1,000.
You're good to go. The one point I want to make about the skills that we're talking about, coming back to farming, agriculture, product, all we're talking about. Accountancy to me is a dying skill. Well, or profession. Well, I shouldn't say dying. It is not sufficiently robust.
Okay.
You cannot find accountants in Grenada. Everything, to my mind, needs to be accounted for, including the money government going to spend now. Is the Accountant General Department adequately equipped to produce per the Constitution and the Public Finance Management Act, the accounts to be audited, let's say by March 2026?
All right.
We have a problem with accountancy. So folks who are listening, ICTS, law, get your kids to do some accountancy. It is a demand or skill or profession in high demand. Just want to stick that in for this work.
Sounds like I'm going to have to go back.
Chairman, on CBI, on the one with the high net worth people that we have, and that is, don't underestimate that.
All right.
The chairman and I have spoken about that already. We just need, in my view, for our Prime Minister, who is very articulate on a lot of stuff, as he ought to be, to get projects. There had to be a lot, 3 or 5 products. Take that pool of people Richard is referring to and get them to Grenada and woo them and say, listen guys, we need your assistance. These are billionaires, way multiple times over.
Right.
And they will get a tax break if they invest in something that they, for Grenada and what can be done here. And the cut flowers is a lovely idea. Could we get them to help us with that? And as Richard said, the science and technology that these guys and the contacts that they have, which is more important.
Yeah.
Who they could put us in contact with for a small island developing state like ours. And one industry or one thing they put will probably multiply many times over. And for them is no money at all, little money. So I just want to take up my chairman, and I think that is such a great opportunity CBI offers.
Right.
Because these are citizens of our country.
So, thanks for that, Chris. So let's go to...
Before you go,
back to
Mr.
you.
Duncan, I know Mr. Robertson wanted to weigh in here, so I want to let her go in and then
I'll come back to the
you.
point. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I actually wanted to weigh in on the CBI and also the accountancy part.
Yeah.
So let me start with the CBI. Like Mr. Diali, I really do applaud the thinking in terms of how we could really evolve the space, in terms of how we see investment migration and what it can do. When you look at those models across the globe, they are investment migration countries where they have used it to their advantage to promote things like the same education system, development in rural areas. I mean, Portugal has always been one of those countries that always stood out to me in terms of some of the plans that they've architected in terms of getting investment into areas where typically the government may not see as a priority area, but you do need to expand reach in terms of what these investment funds could do for you. So I think that would be awesome if we could actually continue on that thought process of how we could utilize high net worth individuals. The second point I wanted to weigh in on is on the matter of the accountancy. And we spoke skills, we spoke capacity a lot earlier. Even in the banking sector, that is a key issue for us. And over the years, I think we've often heard, many a time it is said that the banks do not want to lend to support small business, or the banks are not sufficiently financing productive sectors. But that has been one of the stumbling blocks over the years, the absence of credible financial information on which you can make a decision. And so there is really and truly a need for accountancy skills, because the typical sole trader, the typical small business, you don't need a large firm. You need someone who could come in and work with you at that level and give you a quicker turnaround. And there's a serious void to be filled. So I have to underscore that point made by Mr. Duncan, that while we talk all the good stuff, the ICT, the technology, the digital skills, accountancy, there is a serious void. And we need that because, as we said, we need financing opportunities to drive those small businesses and to really get that sector of the economy going.
I must say that I like what I'm hearing, and My first job was in accounting, so perhaps it's time for me to brush off my blacking pen and get back out there. Mr. Duncan, you did have something that you wanted to add.
Well, thanks for that, Mr. John. So, science and technology. So, yesterday, for example, I think we received 6 kiosks at the MBIA. But I have a little story. So, technology is good, right? But we have this one Grenadian by investment who came to the island. And the story, he's still here, opened up a business. The story is told that when he presented his passport, right, and had a chit chat with the immigration officer said to him, "Welcome home." He said he has traveled in and out his own country multiple times. Nobody in immigration ever told him that. Those were the 2 words that kept this gentleman here.
All right.
I'm saying with the technology, with their 6 kiosks, still have a few people, or maybe tease the kiosk to say welcome home, right? Program the kiosk, but better put a human being or two to interact. You never know at what touch point this thing is going to tip. So you got to keep it on point. I just wanted to make that point for what it is worth.
Very well said.
Yep.
And it is, it has been identified as one of our strengths. I think everybody who's come here has said that, so perhaps it is something that we ought to capitalize on. Mr. Diali, I do want to bring you in. IMEXA.
Right, I mean, I must say for the public, I was a past chairman of marketing board.
Yeah.
And I've heard the government talk about the different ways they want to deal with marketing board. I know the latest one is this private investor to come and look at and change the name to rebrand it to IMEXA or whatever. My view on marketing board is that as how it operates now in terms of the need, we must have a marketing board for the farmers to offer access to markets for their produce. However, part of the problem that we face is the production aspect of our farmers. So we can't ship, marketing boards to ship mangoes and so on before and so forth. And we're not doing that now because production is a problem, and production is so seasonal in our country that it poses challenges on that end. The other thing I want to say about MNIB, no matter what we call it, the model that operates now have to change.
Right.
The model now is not a workable model. Hence, they have to do things like commodities, sugar and flour and rice and so on, in order to maintain its footprint in terms of its outlets. And what happens? You cannot only have vegetable and ground provisions in this organization and expect it to be financially viable.
Right.
So the model has to change, and if this partner is coming in and they want to make it a profitable organization, there will be drastic changes to the model. That has to be accepted in the minds of our people. But we cannot divorce it from the fact that farmers need an outlet. When we had COVID and there was shut down, and farmers you can't shut down the plant. It's still making and giving you stuff. What happened? Marketing board absorbed it. It went to the packing facility in River Road. We took it and then we distributed it to the hospitals and so on and so on. So it kept the farmers going.
All right.
So that is an example of the need for it to be here. And if we want to export, we have a soursop thing with the US, where our soursops have received without problem. If we need to develop agriculture in that sense and move it in that sense, we must have an organization like MNIB to facilitate that. Then we have the problem of production, as I say, production discipline with farmers and where we move them. I have somebody 2 weeks ago asked me, could we ship a 20-foot container of yams? And I tell him, no, we can't. That's the reality, because we don't have enough farmers producing yams to fill a 20-foot container. And dasheen, could we do it? We know we can't. And that is the problem we have with how, now we talk agriculture, how do we get our farmers to identify and look and push them. Jamaica does export containers of yellow yam.
Yeah.
Until they're saying, we boy, the runner, the sprinter was using all kind of thing with yellow yam bolt. But it just goes to show that we have opportunities by the production planning on that side, which Marketing Board, by the way, was assisting with in the remit. So those are the things that we have to look at, regardless of who come in to partner with us.
Okay. Mrs. Robertson, let me piggyback off what Mr. Diali has said. In terms of agricultural production, how do you feel that the budget addresses the idea of ramping up agricultural production in Grenada?
Well, I mean, I've seen provision in the budget for how it will be ramped up. The finer details, I guess we will be able to discover over the next several weeks. But just in terms of the key areas that they're targeting for the same Marketing Board transformation and also the blue economy, I think that there is sufficient attention to and allocation made to move that forward. So I do not have a concern there because there is demonstrated interest in ensuring that we transform agriculture. It's important we do that, right? And let me just shift it away from just looking at it as a productive sector, right? To generate income, etc. Remember, agriculture, it is heavily linked to our tourism sector. I don't think we often make that connection in terms of the linkage. And so the extent to which we ensure that we strengthen that sector, it will also bolster our tourism. So tourism is not just about the visitors who arrive. You need steady supply of high quality food products at the hotels, at the restaurants, at the food vending stalls. And I mean, instead of importing, because one of the things that stood out in looking at the documentation is that continued increasing rate of importation versus what we are able to produce locally, and that is something that we also have to address. That is not just about agriculture in the traditional sense, but also what are those other key sectors that agriculture supports, or which we should ensure that it supports a little more. So I think it's important, and I think I've seen that there is interest in ensuring that we really do transform that sector.
Okay, again, just piggybacking off of that. So, Mr. Diali, the CARICOM has set this target, 25% reduction in the food import bill by, I think, 2030. How feasible do you think it is? I mean, I think at this point it's absolutely necessary for us to shave down the food import bill. Given the budget, given the direction that the government has indicated that we're heading to, as you mentioned, the need for MNIB or some form of it. How feasible is it for us to achieve reduction in the food import bill, and what do you think that reduction can be reasonably?
Well, I mean, years ago, CARICOM had targeted Guyana as the food basket of the region because of the production and the quality of produce out of Guyana. Well, I don't know if it's unfortunate is the right word. Guyana has now shifted to oil and gas, and probably we may not have as much people in agriculture as before. However, I believe that the minister indicated in his budget speech today that poultry is an area to look at, what is happening in poultry. We have businesses in Grenada already involved in poultry, and it's how we could build it and get it better and reduce the import bill on that. And we are chicken eating people, face the reality.
True.
We love chicken. So if we could get that industry to come up to the level that we need on international standards and quality, then the issue is we could reduce the import bill on just that item, which will be significant. But you also highlighted that the feed for that industry, both for poultry and for pigs as well, is a significant cost to the producer. And we have to find a way to sit with the producer here and see how we could arrange that in terms of cost and quality, because it's not just reducing the cost, it's keeping the quality to a certain level. So there are opportunities, I believe. our negotiation skills have to be employed to see how, because as a private sector company that was given certain concessions, is there a need to relook and see how we could adjust how we negotiate with them on the concessions and other things. So that is an area where the food import bill could be significantly impacted, meats in particular. You know, when we had a drought last year, a lettuce was $40 in the supermarket. I mean, whereas if we had greenhouses in effect and using the science and technology, we wouldn't have had that kind of issue.
Right.
Because in a drought situation, you could control it. So hence Richard's point about using the science to impact, you know, what we do in agriculture. Cannot be business as usual. Nutmegs and cocoa, we have the best in the world. But since 1940, we let the nutmeg fall on the ground. Up to now, we can involve a science or technology to have it fall in a netted area and reduce the amount of spoilage. Because you can use almost everything in a nutmeg, from the shell to the maize and so on. So we just have not, up to this day, we still planting 3 nutmeg trees to hope that one will be a female. I mean, come on. We have all kind of genetic technology, and we just not using the science to inform and reduce cost. And that is something that we need to do. Our cocoa is the best cocoa in the world in some instances. Yes, we get a touch with beryl, and we need to, but cocoa is very resilient. And we have identified St. David's as a place that gives you top quality in terms of what happens in cocoa. So there is a lot, but there are low-hanging fruits in my view in terms of agriculture and security of food security that we could attack now and get a better effect out of that industry.
Mr. Duncan, what do you think are some additional steps that we need to take in order to modernize agriculture, especially with the idea of food security being so high on our priority list?
Okay, at the risk of not leaving in here alive, I will make the following points. No significant sector in Grenada, at least in my lifetime so far, has modernized and advanced without foreign direct investment. I take banking. Yes, you had your Barclays, you had your CIBC, who were not really interested. Republic Bank bought some shares in NCB. Trinidadians came in, they had a different banking model, and everything changed. Everybody got up to the party.
Okay.
Hotels. We had no problem. We had Mafikin, Cedars Inn. Which other one? I said little hotels all over the place, right? Trying to drive tourism. The only big one we had really was Holiday Inn, Ramada, whatever. But the real transformation in hotel accommodation came, to my view, with the arrival of Sandals, with Royalton, with Six Senses, and such alike. Foreign direct investment. If we go to telecoms, we are a telephone company, partly owned by the state, right? Cable and Wireless ramp up the game, did a pretty decent job. Digicel came in, transformed the sector, right? We could take electricity, blackout morning, noon and night for years, right? The WRB came in, transformed, changed. The same cocoa we just talked about, and chocolate, is until what? Moss Green, or what was it for that name?
Moss Green.
Moss Green, until he came.
Right.
And then people got with the program, so then now Chanel is doing what other people are doing their thing. So my thesis, we had to realize Grenada is small. The population of Grenada, to me, is half an apartment block in Mumbai or Beijing. Not big. Our population fit comfortably in certain stadium or stadia in other parts of the world. The land mass is not big, as Christy see much bigger than land. So my point is, instead of taking this romantic, narrow, parochial approach to our development and advancement, I want to hug and hold. This narrow nationalist approach has not served us well. I've brought the evidence forward. We could learn and grow when other people come in. So take banking again. Co-op remain a Grenadian bank, but we have learned and grown from the foreign banks. The competition that they brought, the technology they brought, we mimic, we emulate, and in some cases, we outperform.
Right.
So I'm saying agriculture needs a similar type of intervention. On the productive side, on the sale distribution. So the idea of having a public-private partnership with MNIB, to my mind, is merited. And to Chris's point, we need to make sure we choose the right partner. And as far as the model is concerned, right, government might have an influence over the model. But if this person is majority shareholder, they come to make money. Sure. But how do you make money? By selling things that people can't buy? No. You must sell it at a price that the consumers could afford.
And cut costs.
And cut costs, reduce waste, efficient. You understand me? So I'm saying, again, I might not live in here alive, but this is my thesis in terms of what is required to drive agriculture forward.
So do you think there will be a positive impact on the price of food at the supermarket should something like this succeed?
Well, price is supposed to go down.
Even
well,
though
no. But okay, what has gone up right away? Right? Initially, the cost of telecoms to make a call to Trinidad was how much? Or the United States? You had to call our operator, you had to sit up midnight, 10 o'clock to make the call. You know, when Flow or Lime, whoever the beef was bringing the system, you had a beeper. Then, you know, when I call you, I pay. When you call me, you pay. I'm saying the price of telecoms has come down.
all right.
I'm suggesting exactly, and the technology that was brought in. I'm saying to you that the price of electricity today, as high as it is, would have been higher had the state still been involved. That's my view.
I want to throw
Right?
a spin on what Richard is saying.
Okay.
That we need to consider, and traditionally we have been doing, and I think needs to change. You know, when we meet with countries that come with trade missions here, big countries, there's always about, you know, there are certain things they see that we have that they think, take cocoa for example. Could we take a container of cocoa from you because we want to use cocoa? I have said in our forum recently that we need to shift that.
Yeah.
Now, we had industries where we had a thing called nutmeg, which was doing well before the owners had issues. I said to them at that time, why not do a partnership? I don't want to send a container to you. Let me patent, you have my formula, I patent it. I come into India and I'm letting you produce it. What you could produce it for, I could never produce it here.
Yeah.
And the population I have available for market, I could never have it here. Why don't we do partnership arrangements in countries that have less production costs and access to markets that is far bigger than we could ever imagine? And if you, as a businessman here with a product that you believe we could do that, have a 10% stake in a $1 million business versus a 10% stake in a $1 billion business. I mean, that is not, that's common sense.
It's a no-brainer.
A no-brainer. So we have this fear of how the models over the years is always, boy, what we could come and get from you, whether it's banana, cocoa, nutmeg, whatever. Let's change it. I am giving you my formula on certain things. We have it patented, we license, we set up a partnership arrangement, and you do the production. And let's see where that takes us. I'm just throwing that into Richard.
Fully, Chris. Absolutely. You see, we have to be smart about it, because truth be told, I'm sure somebody, some part of the world already has already decomposed this nutmeg product. Correct. Probably under a different name, a different brand that we don't even know about. My point is, though, the brand name is what it is. You have a world-class athlete, Kirani James. Have you ever paid this guy some money to advertise this pain relieving spray, which could easily become the go-to spray for athletes globally?
Right.
They have not even done it. Right? Now, to me, with the passing of the owner, government could easily buy the patent from the people or find some way to put your hand on the formula. And to Chris's point, either license it out or you yourself mass produce. Coming back again to size and scale, I think there was one gentleman, the story goes, he had some nutmeg oil Went to our trade show, the people love the product. But they say for us to get this product into America, we had to get tests, a little vial. So send us a container with 1 million vials. End that story. When you get 1 million vials of nutmeg oil to send to penetrate the US market in Grenada, sheer size and scale is not there. So we had to find different techniques, to do these things.
I'm happy you brought up nutmeg. We are fast running out of time, but nutmeg ties directly into the health sector, and there has been significant movement within the budget concerning health, including a mention of the NHI. It's a talk that has been on the ground for quite some time. I want to start with Ms. Robertson. It's one of the areas that you identified earlier that was particularly of importance to you. So in terms of the NHI and its potential for implementation, do you feel like that's increased now with this budget, or is it much of the same?
No, I mean, again, I'm going to come back to the points I made about the purpose and the intention that I saw in the budget. There's this saying that you listen for what is said and what is also not said. And in just reading the budget and all the supporting documentation, I mean, intention was clear. And you're seeing a consistent path in terms of sticking to the game plan as to those key areas that were identified as much needed. And definitely, I'm comfortable. I feel comfortable that the government will pursue the national health insurance. It is needed. Again, this is 2025. And why should a Grenadian feel that you are a second-class citizen for basic services or a basic standard of living? Healthcare, to me, is very basic. And then we talk about reliance on tourism. Tourists want to know that they're coming to a place where you have a healthy population, you have adequate health care. Grenadians need to feel that they have the peace of mind to know that there's a support system.
Right.
Because if you're not enrolled in a private sector health plan, think about the mass population who cannot access certain health services. And so, I'm a strong supporter for that. And based again on the government's approach to how it will finance its spending, I don't think that anything is impossible once we stick to that trajectory in ensuring that we close those gaps that have been identified.
So again, you're the risk management expert here. You mentioned a lot about implementation. Mr. Ayali re-emphasized that we have an implementation problem. What is it that we need to do to ensure that NHI gets done?
I think it comes back to the same basic governance, because part of governance is ensuring that when you have made certain propositions to your stakeholders, you are held accountable to do so, and that you have the necessary systems in place internally to hold you accountable. So at the end of the day, again, I'm going to come back to the same point that I made earlier at the start, that to ensure that implementation is not the same old story. The key success factor is ensuring that we build that capacity where we see there's a need to, in terms of what is required to execute this budget, and we get it done. Because remember, we spoke earlier about the confidence that we need to maintain, having rolled back that clause in terms of stalling debt repayment. All of this is interrelated in terms of how you manage implementation. Over the years, we've also heard a lot about how we can't access grant funding. One of the key issues has been, what has been your implementation history? So I think there is a call to action. I don't think it is normal times. The world is definitely going through a shift, and I think we as Grenadians have to recognize that it's not just about the government and this budget, but how can all sectors, all entities recognize that we have to recalibrate, and we have to relook how we implement our strategies, how we can support this overarching implementation plan going forward in terms of how we build out a more sustainable nation.
Mr. Diali?
Well, I am not as positive as Ms. Robertson on this NHI thing because previous administration, this administration has failed in their contract arrangements with the people they brought in for NHI.
Yeah.
That is the reality.
True.
We have not had any positive results. I don't know if it is the issue of what the results are showing. In Grenada, we don't want to pay for basic health. We have to learn that we have to pay. A blood test, for example, that will cost generally $120 depending on what you have to do. The hospital charging you $40 or $60. Then the hospital run out of reagents, they can't do stuff. So we have to change the mindset to understand that we have to pay and learn to pay for good medical attention. That's the first thing. The NHI thing is what is needed to support people of a certain economic strata that can't afford certain things. So you come into emergency care, get full treatment, get all the analysis done, but after that you have to decide you have to pay.
Right.
We cannot afford not to pay, and hence NHI. But if the consultants that have been engaged in NHI previous administration, this doesn't seem to be able to produce a report that gives us what needs to be done. The government spoke in its budget of using Mount Sinai to help with the current hospital operation and its administration and what happens there, and the new facility that they want to engage in. So is it that Mount Sinai will help us with this $2.5 million in this budget for NHI? Is that sufficient for the consultants to do what they have to do? So there are a lot of questions that have not been fully ventilated on the failures of previous consultants under NHI. Probably if that is said, then we probably need to understand probably more money is going to be required to get a consultant to set up what it is. Could NIS at one time facilitate a NHI? And what is the formula there to have that work and work efficiently? So I think, we're throwing some more money at it. We need to understand whether this will work this time, or else we just can't seem to be getting the right reports on what is happening with NHI.
So, call me devil's advocate. Should we abandon this? Maybe try something else? Mr. Duncan, I'll let you answer and then we'll go back to Mr. Diali.
Right, so I'll make two statements. First of all, the road to hell is very well paved with good intentions. 1. 2, in blind man country, one eye man is king. So NHI sounds nice. But unless your health outcomes are going to improve, asking people to pay for what they're getting free now will not work. So that's part of the calculus we have to bring into play. And I think we need to wrap our heads around that, to Chris's point. However, please, in no project of any size where you're using public money, should you have your consultant, your contractor, your advisor being one and the same person. It either fails or you get robbed blindly. So the amount of money that both governments have spent so far is a simple consequence of downright, in my view, lack of risk management.
All right.
You can't be serving yourself as a contractor and at the same time advise. So the government just keep getting, bamboozled as far as I'm concerned on this NHI with the very same outfit. And there was no one on the government side who knew enough. Right? You didn't hire an independent consultant to protect your interests. So whatever the consultant, contractor, advisor bring for you, what are you going to do with it? Really do with it, right? But they accept it, and when you get to a certain point, you're probably frustrated that you can't go beyond that. I am saying, if you have a project, design the project properly. Design the work before you start the work. And that is the biggest feelings with NHI on 2 occasions. Will we get it right the third time? I think we can, provided you have an independent advisor, consultant, call them what you want, who can hold the entity that is providing the design and the model and all that kind of stuff to account on your behalf. Yeah.
All right. So we don't abandon, we just restructure.
Well, you have to wheel and come again because, you spend the money twice so far, right? The general sentiment is that it is required, and I think the evolution of financing healthcare dictates
All right.
that you have a decent model for funding it. So, yeah.
All right, folks, we are out of time. So I want us to wrap up this afternoon's discussion. Perhaps we're going to have to reconvene at some point in the future. But let's wrap up this afternoon by just looking back broadly over the budget. As you close, tell me some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, and of course, if there are any missed opportunities that perhaps we maybe can pivot to in the next 6 months or something for 2026. I'll start with Mrs. Robertson, and we'll make our way across the panel.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap up again, as we started, my view is very comprehensive. It offers new opportunities at how we look at financing a government's budget. That is pleasant to see, a move away from the conventional financing sources. I don't know that my banker peers might view that positively, but there is opportunity actually for the banks, because here you have the opportunity through your wealth management and brokerage services to support the government's agenda to educate the population about how they can better invest the funds that are sitting in the deposits. We want to see that advancement in the space as well. That is one of our duties as bank, to ensure that you build a financially literate population who understands how to make money work for them. And so I think even with the budget and how they intend to steer away somewhat from conventional financing, there is still a role for the financial sector, the public-private partnerships that present great opportunity as well to involve the banking system and also the private entities. I think we touched really nicely on some of the key risks, the issues we still need to manage.
Right.
And I think we are all generally clear-sighted on what these are. Again, reflecting on what went into the preparation of the documents and the approach, for example, in terms of looking at your different scenarios, exploring the options before selecting which strategy will work best for Grenada in terms of realizing the budget. I think that was excellent work in terms of the level of contemplation that went in. However, again, it just boils down to effective governance, proper risk management, and staying the course in understanding that these are not normal times. There is much uncertainty, even though for now things look positive, but there could be a change in all that we are experiencing now as stable times, and we must remain cognizant that those external risk factors, they still remain a threat, and we have to ensure that responsibility, the discipline, that it remains. And finally, the issue of capacity to implement, to execute the plans of the government. That is key. And just one final point, as I reflected today, we talk capacity, but I think the whole issue of looking at across the entire government system, whatever performance management systems exist, that is key, because it is not the government to implement. The work of the government is executed through the various ministries and the entire public sector. So again, in terms of looking at the necessary supporting mechanisms as it relates to performance accountability, that is key, in addition to skills and capacity building.
Well said. Mr. Duncan.
Yes, so thank you very much. I would want to emphasize the positive side, right, where we are building capacity for the future, helping people to help themselves to be more productive, to be more employable, and to close, those deficits that we have in the Grenada economy. The big projects that are going to be transformative, I think they are nicely aligned to the National Sustainable Development Plan, and that should be complemented. The viability of the budget, I think, is well established. Current account surplus, great. Overall deficit, financing is known and almost assured, including, I want to emphasize again, new treasury bills on the regional government securities market. Come by, diversify your holdings. That's a message for the population. And also to emphasize the fact that we must improve our productivity. I think that was coming through from time to time, to Senator Dially's point. My biggest issue, I think it is common across all three of us, I call it differently. I call it execution velocity. Velocity is speed in the right direction. Because you could execute a project poorly and the project could fail. So it's not just execution for its own sake.
All right.
Proper, well-planned, well-sequenced and resource implementation of your various plans. And that's a big drawback. It's an age-old problem. Has the government done enough to train project managers, train risk managers, right, to do these things? The answer is no. So therefore, the big risk is that the ambitions of the government, to my mind, is outpacing the capacity of the bureaucracy to execute. And there are ways around mitigating that risk.
Right.
If the government is bold enough to say, this is how I'm going to mitigate that risk. But it is, to me, the single most important risk. And finally, the external shocks and the US. Nature hates vacuums. In fact, nature detests vacuums. So if the US retreat, rest assured, other people will be advancing. And those who wish to advance might be encouraging them to retreat anyway. So you have South-South trading, right? You have China as an emerging, friendly force in the world for, however you might want to interpret that, right? The war in Ukraine will be brought to an end, right? And who knows? Russia might be on the ascendancy and rise again with the help, right, of the friends in the Western world. We don't know. What we have to do is to be sufficiently attentive, sufficiently agile in making the right moves. The world that we know 5, 10, 15 years ago is not the world that is unfolding before our eyes, and is not the world that we'll see in the next 5 years. But figure out what is going to be, position yourself, make the right friends, make the right moves, and we should be all right.
Okay. Mr. Dially, final word is yours.
Thank you, sir. I will start with budget. A budget, in the sense of the word, is your best estimation, taking everything into consideration of what you expect and the plans to happen. We must prepare for things not happening according to the budget, and how we deal with that. The government has a responsibility to present this from a legal point of view and otherwise to spend, and to give its aspirations of where they intend to target. I think construction is a good place, and it has a lot of indirect advantages if you could execute. Tourism, because of how tourism is doing well. The one area we didn't touch on tonight was security. At the recent CARICOM Health Conference, security was an area that came up as a significant area apart from education. So this budget addresses those areas, but security is another area that is significant for us, and what is going to happen in crime and maintaining safety of the environment.
All right.
So that is an area that also needs to be examined. But in the end, I think the government has done a good job in targeting the areas that need to be targeted. As Richard said, we need to pay attention to the risks, the external shocks, what is going to happen, the ability to execute, capacities, and all the things we discussed here this evening. So we need to pay attention. But a budget, as I started off, you may achieve your targets, you may not. How you refine and change midstream, and that is what we don't do in government. We do it in the private sector. If after your first quarter, your first half year, you're not on target, the conversation is, do we get back on target? What we need to do? How do we need to tinker the situation? What we need to adjust and where? We don't seem to have that in the public service and the public in government, and that is something that the Ministry of Finance and the people in finance need to be doing, in my view, so that if by the end of the first quarter of this year, well, we almost at the end of the first quarter, but by the half year, all that we spoke about today in the budget is not being achieved as it ought to. Where do we need to make the changes, and how fast? Because Richard say speed is going to be key, velocity, and what happened with the quality. So those are the things that I think we need to have a deeper and foresight and what is happening and how the world changing fast in front of us, and how it's going to affect us. So those would be my closing comments, and I think we are on target in terms of aligning this to the medium strategy goals and development and the medium-term plan and what we're doing there. So we keep in a harmony in terms of the long-term strategy for the country, which is a good thing. We didn't have that before. I know that we have it. We're staying on target with the long-term strategy, which is key. So that is a positive. So I end there by saying that, we just have to pay attention to what is going to happen.
And we'll certainly be paying attention. I thank all of our viewers for paying attention and being with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We have been discussing, perhaps breaking the ice really, on the post-budget discussion. We'll continue discussions like these over the course of the next few weeks, especially with the budget debate that begins on Monday, God's willing. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your continued discussion across our social media platforms.